A season ago, the Philadelphia Eagles sat at 10-1, and it looked like they were going to lock up the number one seed in the NFC. But they would lose 6 of their final 7 games, including a blowout loss in the wild card round of the playoffs, and it was a very disappointing end to this season. 1 year later, they just scored 55 points in the NFC Championship, and they are moving on to the Super Bowl. Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts, and from a historic collapse to NFC champions, today we're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. Thank you for tuning in. Now, as I just mentioned, the Eagles went on a very bad stretch in the year last year, and a lot of that came down to ball safety or lack thereof and turnovers, specifically from quarterback Jalen Hurts. And this year, it's been the exact opposite of that. When people talk about Jalen Hurts this year, he threw 5 picks all season. He has not thrown one in the playoffs. They're going to say that he has been efficient. But there is a difference between stability and efficiency. Stability is the way that he's played all year, being uber cautious with the ball and sometimes taking a while in the pocket. But when you get to the NFC Championship game and you're playing against one of the most surprising teams in all of football, but also one of the best teams in all of football, some checkdowns and screen passes, just short, easy throws, that's not going to cut it. And in this game, Jalen Hurts was not just stable, but he was efficient. He looked more comfortable than ever. He was playing within the flow of the offense. And when you add on the run game to the way that Jalen Hurts was able to get the ball through the air today, that is a combination that gets you 55 points like they just had and almost 500 yards of offense. This was an explosive game by the Philadelphia Eagles. And going to the Super Bowl, I don't think things could have gone any better for them. Jalen Hurts has been stable all year, but at times a little bit too conservative. But this game, he played within the flow of the offense and was not just stable, but he was truly, truly efficient in moving the ball downfield. That is what defines it for me. Efficiency is moving the ball downfield. Stability is being safe with it, and he was a combination of both. You can be stable without being efficient, but you can only be efficient if you've locked down that stability first. And Jalen Hurts all year has had that stability on lockdown, but this game he really unlocked the quarterback prowess that we've seen from him in years past, and he was not just stable but efficient. And I wanted to get that point across to start off, especially with the turnovers that they had all of last year. And someone else that they had all of last year was that running back in DeAndre Swift, who ran for over 1,000 yards. And as soon as he was gone, there were question marks about this team just because not necessarily the caliber of back that Swift was and how that's completely irreplaceable, but the fact that this is a very run-oriented team. There were question marks about how they were going to replace him in just the same kind of vein, have a guy that produces and runs for over 1,000 yards. Just because of how much you like to run the ball, you want to have some stability at that running back position, but they go out there and they get Saquon Barkley from a division rival New York Giants who just didn't want to pay him. And he becomes the 9th player in NFL history to rush for 2,000 yards. And if he had played Week 18, he probably could have broke Eric Dickerson's rushing yards record. This was an incredible season by Saquon Barkley. And I talked about Hurts being very conservative. He was able to do that because of the way that this rushing offense operated. With the incredible season that Saquon Barkley had, one of the best running back seasons we've ever seen, it felt like every single play you had to have all eyes on Saquon Barkley. And even if you did, he could break out for a big run. And Swift, as solid as he was last year, him and Saquon Barkley are not on the same level. And this is the best running back in the league, at least based off of this season. At 27 years old, signing him to a multi-year deal with the way that most running backs don't even get a second contract in the modern NFL. In the season that he just had, he seemed like a match made in heaven over here in Philadelphia, and it really sets the tone for the entirety of the running back position going forward. I've had a video go out about this in the past, but there was kind of this idea that the running back position is dead, in that every single year, after a guy's done with a rookie contract, you can replace him with someone else who's going to get you mostly the same production on a cheaper contract. But this year, you've had guys like Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs go to different teams and have so much success there. Some of the best that they've had in their careers. and it really sets the tone for the entire running back market. It resets it entirely, and I think we're going to see a running back renaissance, and I love to see that because the game, the NFL, it's not going to be one dimensional anymore. You're going to have running backs, and you're going to pay them a little bit more because you've seen the success that teams like the Eagles have had this year, especially if they go on to win the Super Bowl. And while Saquon in his entirety, the whole season he had was very, very impressive. What also deserves to be mentioned is his offensive line. This is one of, if not the best offensive line in all of football, and it's been that way for years now. Lane Johnson, Cam Jurgens, who was Jason Kelsey's handpicked successor, Jurgens was, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson. This is Mekhi Becton even had a career renaissance here. This is an elite offensive line, and that allows everything on the offense to work. So often we don't appreciate the O line, but that the O line have been the heroes for the Eagles this season. Without them, this offense does not function half as efficiently, and so often we don't give the linemen their flowers. But they deserve all of it for what they've done for this Eagles team. And this brings me to my last point here, and that is on the other side of the ball, the defense for this team. Last year in that back half, I talked about the turnovers already, but aside from the turnovers, the biggest issue was that defense. It seemed like so often, especially late in the game, against a team like the Giants or the Cardinals, the secondary especially would just collapse. There would be a blown coverage and it would lead to a game losing touchdown. And these weren't just garbage time games at the end of the year. The Eagles at this point had had a little bit of a slide, but it was against teams like the Cowboys and the 49ers, who, mind you, they had good seasons last year relative to this year, but they were losing to good teams, and there was no shame in it necessarily. They were still in contention to lock up the one seed even after losing a couple games. But then they go out there and they lose to teams like the Cardinals and Giants because of that secondary and takes them out, makes them a wild card team. That really was a nail in the coffin for this Eagles team. But this year, they bring in Vic Fangio to be their defensive coordinator, who is a defensive mastermind. He is a finalist for Assistant Coach of the Year, and it's probably going to be him and Ben Johnson that are the two guys most deserving of that award. They signed linebacker Zach Bond on a 1-year deal, and he has been amazing for them. Arguably the best linebacker in the entire league, a Defensive Player of the Year finalist. Arguably deserves it for the season that he's had. It's been uber impressive for Zach Bond. And then in that secondary, of course, you have Quinton Mitchell and you have Cooper Dejean. Because last year, this secondary was Darius Slay and everybody else. And Slay is only getting older, as good as he can still be in spurts. The quarterback position, you've got to always be able to keep up with the newest generation of wide receivers. So as you age, it can be harder to do that. So to add in Cooper Dejean and Quinton Mitchell, who have been some of the best quarterbacks in the entire NFL this year, not just among rookies, but the entirety of the league this year, they've been that good, especially Quinton. And even Darius Slay has had a better year than he did last year, and that's because he's not relied on as much. And that's okay at this portion of his career. Defenses kind of were able to attack him last year because that was all this team had in the secondary, really. But this year, you have him be part of a trio of great quarterbacks, and that's really revitalized his NFL career. It looks like he's not going to be in Philly next year, according to statements from the man himself. But it was a great last year at Lincoln Financial for Darius Slay, and that's also thanks to his help in Quinton Mitchell and Cooper Dejean. And then also, you can't talk about this defense without talking about Jalen Carter. When Brandon Graham went down, it looked like that was going to be a major, major loss for the Eagles, and rightfully so. This is a veteran who has a great mind for the game. He knows how to exploit an offensive line, and he was still producing very well for his age, impacting the game at a high level. But Jalen Carter has had some of the most snaps of a among all pass rushers this season. He has been exceptional in each one of those snaps. One of the best pass rushers in the entire league. Aaron Donald came out recently and said that Jalen Carter reminded him of AD, and that is one of, if not the highest honor you can receive as a defensive player. It's been a great year for Jalen Carter. And so now that we've highlighted individual players for this team, I think I want to point out here for the last portion here is the fact that this is the best chance that the Eagles are going to have to win the Super Bowl, and they are ready to capitalize. because they just beat the Washington Commanders. And this was a very surprising young upstart team led by a rookie quarterback. They're inside your division, and they're only going to get better by the year, given the age of Jane Daniels. And then on the other end, you've got the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. And as great as both those teams are, the Chiefs have had a little bit of an offensive slump this year. Their defense has been able to, lead them to a 15-2 record. But for the most part, this offense, they haven't scored 30 points all year. It's been sluggish, especially by what we're used to seeing from KC. And for the Bills, they don't have a true number one wide receiver. So especially going up against the great secondary, when your best one is a guy like Khalil Shakir or Amari Cooper, who's been real quiet this playoffs, those both are solid chances for Eagles to go out there and win a Super Bowl. And that's, of course, your biggest goal. And the Eagles are ready to capitalize. They've had a great year, and this may be the best chance that they have, considering the landscape of the league, to go out there and win that Lombardi. And they are in perfect position to do so after a year where they just collapsed. It's been an incredible turnaround, thanks to both great play on the field and off of it, thanks to the mastermind of a GM they seem to have in Howie Roseman. It's been a great turnaround for the Eagles. They start off the year 2-2, by the way. They've only lost one game since then. And going into the bye, it kind of looked like it was a continuation of the back half of last year, where they just couldn't do anything right, and the secondary would just collapse. But after that bye week, going into week 6 and beyond, they've been incredible. One season it's been for the Eagles, and there's a very good chance they cap it off with a Super Bowl crown. But right now, they are your NFC champions. What a turnaround it has been for the Philadelphia Eagles in every asset and facet of the game. That is all for today's episode of State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts, and thank you for listening.